Hi everyone, tonight's lesson is going to be two things. Tonight we are actually going to work on our novelty print idea for the midterm to sit with our plaid and stripe layout for the midterm. We're going to work on that together, but first I'm also going to show you, before we work on that print, I'm going to show you how to add another artboard to an existing working file. So if you already started off with a couple artboards and you wanted to add another artboard into an existing file, I'm going to show you a tool to do that. So if you go to your double toolbar, there's a tool right here. I'm pointing at it with the cursor. It's actually right above the hand tool. It looks like a little square with like corners here. If you click on that, if you hover over it, it's called the Artboard tool. If you click on that tool, you'll actually notice in that tool that it's also going to tell you what number your artboard is. So artboard 1, artboard 2, artboard 3. And then if you wanted to add a new artboard, you take that tool and it looks exactly like the icon you see here on the toolbar. But what you do is you click and drag it down, and you can click and drag it down to a certain size that looks like it might be a letter size artboard like what we had over here, but you won't know for sure that it's actually a perfect 8.5 by 11 letter size artboard until you hit the return key on your keyboard. After you draw your artboard with the Artboard tool, hit the return key with your keyboard, and this box will pop up, Artboard Options. When that box pops up, all you have to do to make sure that the board that you're creating, the artboard you're creating, is a letter size page, which is what I want for the midterm. You click under the word preset, the little arrow right here will give you more options. And just for future, you can change your artboards to letter size page, legal size, or tabloid. I usually only work in a letter size page or a tabloid size page, which is 11.5 by 17 for people that will have a bigger portfolio. But for this project, I want you to use a letter size, which is the 8.5 by 11. Click on that, and then also double check in your under orientation that your box that's highlighted in black is the horizontal orientation, because that's how I want the midterm project to be presented, in horizontal orientation. So once you pick the letter, you will already see your numbers change. Your width and your height will be 8.5 by 11, and your orientation is horizontal. And once you do that, you hit OK. And now you for sure have a horizontal artboard that is a letter size page. And you can, while you're in the Artboard tool, you can move it around the page if you need to move it in a different layout, or you can just line it side by side. And then you can zoom out, Command minus. You can also click on all the artboards by holding Shift. Again, you have to be in the Artboard tool to do this. If you click on one artboard, second, third, and fourth artboard, and you hold the Shift key down, you can actually window align the artboards so that they are all flush on one top edge. So window align right here, vertical align top. Now all your artboards, even though you added a brand new one, will now all be perfectly aligned to the top edge as well, which is a really great tool to have for making a very professional presentation, that all your artboards are aligned and they're all the same size and orientation. Okay, so now that we reviewed the Artboard tool, we're going to start working on our novelty print for the midterm. So first I just wanted to, when I showed this lesson the last time that we met before this new world that we live in started, that was our last lesson together. And what I showed you is a bunch of tools that I was able to use to create any print that you want to create. So I'm going to go over those same tools I showed you in class, which is the pencil tool, the brush tool, and the shape tool. I'm going to show you a lot of different tools, and it's up to you to design your own custom print using whatever tools you want. You can use one tool, you can use several tools, whatever's going to give you the desired look that you want for your custom print. In this print, I actually used a combination of the brush tool, paintbrush tool, the shape tool, and also the pencil tool. And I use all those three tools in combination to create this star print. And you can see, just like the other artboard, just like the other midterm lessons that I showed you previously in the stripe and plaid layout, I have same layout with a heading, colorway 1, colorway 2, the same print shown in two distinctly different colorways, color chips that belong to every color that exists inside this print, and color names underneath that associate with the actual color. So that's, again, just laying out the midterm in a certain way that everything is nice and uniformed, everything's nice and aligned, text is aligned, color chips aligned, fabric swatches are aligned, headers aligned, everything's nice and professional looking. So to start doing a custom novelty print, and it's, again, I'm never going to dictate what this print's going to look like to you. This is your creativity, so let it shine. I'm just going to show you what I did here, and your print's going to look total opposite of mine, but I'm just going to show you some tools that you can use to create your own print. So this is where I've been adamant on the plaid and stripe to only focus on using the fill color and not the stroke. This time in your novelty print, you can have colors in your fill and your stroke depending on what kind of desired look you want for your print. The goal of the goal of any novelty print is you want to create a cluster of images, just one cluster of images that you kind of randomly space inside of a box. And this is our ground, what I'll refer to later as our ground color box. And place those images inside a box. Make sure you feel good about what looks like it is inside that box. Make sure everything is confined inside the box where there's no parts of your print sticking out outside of these boundaries of the box, but they don't have to meet at edge to the box. So as you see this print go into object pattern make window and watch it repeat, that will help you determine how big this ground color box is. And if your shapes inside the box are working well in a pattern repeat or not. So I just encourage you for the beginning of this lesson to just start drawing random little doodles of whatever kind of images you want to draw, and I'll show you a couple tools that you can do that. So just to show you what I did here, I personally, there's a bunch of tools under here. Under the shape tool, we've been only really ever using the rectangle tool under here, but there's also a rounded rectangle tool, an ellipse tool, which is great for circles or oval shapes, polygon tool, which will give you polygon shapes, and star tool. I would encourage my students to stay away from the flare tool. I've had bad experiences with other students that have used that. It's a very complex pattern, and it will make your pattern, your files crash if you use too much of it. So I would just stay in between the star and the rectangle tool if you're going to put shapes into your design. I want to also show you that underneath the shaper tool, if you click and hold down any tool that has a little diamond triangle in the right hand corner of it, if you click and hold down, that means there's other tools that exist underneath. You just have to click and hold to find them. Under the shaper tool is the pencil tool, and we worked a little bit with that on our gathered skirt sketch earlier this semester, but you have to click and find it underneath the shaper tool. And then the other tool I'm going to use for this novelty print is the paintbrush tool. So those are just a few tools that I'm going to use to actually draw with. And don't forget that you can always use our trusty pen tool that we use to draw all of our garment CADs. That also, if you want something to be more exact, I would encourage you to use the pen tool if you want more of a free, organic type drawing where it's a little bit more sketchy. The paintbrush and the pencil tool work better for those things. But we always have the pen tool to go back to as well. So for this, I'm going to start off, because I'm just going to try and replicate the star print again. I'm going to start off using the star shape underneath the rectangle tool, star tool. And I'm just going to click and drag a star. And this is where I'm going to tell you that you can toggle back and forth between fill colors, stroke colors. I'm just going to brainstorm a bunch of different things. Again, it's up to you, whatever you want to use and how you want to use it for your particular print. So for this particular print, I did a red fill color for my star with a burgundy colored stroke outline that I converted into a different brush from the brush library. So I'll show you how I did that right now. Right now I just created a star. Right now it's a white filled star with a black stroke outline. But if I want to double click on the fill box, I can change it to red fill. It still has a black stroke outline. That's fine. But if I wanted that distress look, like you see in here on my star, I have a very distressed kind of brush stroke. What I would do then is I would go to Window, Brushes. And I also encourage when you're working on your novelty prints that you have, Window, Brushes, and also window stroke open at the same time, because you're going to use these tools to kind of mess with the way your stroke lines look, and also the thickness of your stroke can be changed here under the weight. So depending on the look that you want, you might want to have window brushes and window stroke open at the same time. For this, to get this distressed looking line, there's several different brushes under the brush library. And if you click under window brushes, you see a couple in here that randomly default, a few up here that randomly default in Illustrator when you open up that box. But if you want to open up the brush libraries menu, click on here, which the icon looks like a little stack of books. Click down on it and go under, I'm just going to show you a few brushes, but feel free to explore everything that's in here. So there's different arrow brushes, there's some artistic brushes, which I really like for kind of hand sketching. There's border brushes. The only thing with that is it actually opens up to like custom borders that someone else designed. So I'd encourage you for this project to not use those, because those won't be your custom design. They're going to end up being someone else's. There's bristle brushes, there's decorative brushes. Again, some of them here are custom designs that someone else did. So for this novelty print, I would encourage you to stay away from decorative ones as well. Haven't really ever used image brush or any of these down below, but feel free to open them up and check out what's inside. My favorite brush library is the artistic brush library, and there's lots of different ones you can explore in here. So for this, the way I did my star print, I actually went into artistic calligraphic brush. Oh, actually I didn't for this, now I realize, but there's a bunch of different fun brushes in here. I actually went here under the default brush library, clicked on that, which is like more of a distressed looking line. And you can see when I clicked on it, the thickness of the stroke line, this is still, I still want to emphasize that this is still a stroke line. Even though it looks really distressed, that still is made up of a stroke line. You can always tell something is a stroke because it has a blue line cutting through the middle of it. So it's still made up of points, just like you would draw with the pen tool. So I wanted to emphasize that, because look at how thick this distressed brush is around my red filled star. If anytime I wanted to change the weight of that stroke line, and the weight of the stroke line is just how thick a line appears. So if I want it to be thinner, I'm going to go below the 1 point. If I want it to be, thinner, yeah, if I wanted to be thicker stroke line, I'd go above 1 point. So for this, I think I may have went to 0.5, and you can tell that the line, the distress line, got a lot thinner. It's not as big and chunky like it once was. So if I click on it now, and I want it to be really chunky, look what happens. Some of these numbers, if I go up too high, they actually distort the brush way more. They make it so thick that it actually looks really abstract, and there might be something cool you can play with there, because maybe that's a look of something that you like by going thicker. But I actually want the star to be the highlight, so I'm going to do a thinner stroke line at 0.5. Again, feel free to explore what each brush line does and how the weight of the stroke under window stroke affects it. So there you go. And then if I wanted to double click on my stroke color, because my stroke color is black here, and I wanted to do a different color, you can always pick from the color picker window. And I picked like more of a burgundy color. And that was one entity of my star. And remember, you can always click on any object afterwards, and you can also play with rotation using the black arrow. So if you click on it, any shape that you create with the black arrow, you can rotate it by waiting for the double bendy arrow to show itself. You can scale it by waiting for the double-sided arrow to show itself on the scaling boxes. You can hold shift if you want to keep the scaling to be proportional and not stretch out. If I don't hold shift, the star starts to get skewed in a weird way. So if you want to keep the proportions the same of your shape, you just kind of hold shift when you scale with the black arrow. And so there's my first star, using the shape tool and using the brush library and using window stroke. So like I said, there's many different brushes in here. I encourage you to click on them. They will open up their own brush library when you clicked on them, and you can click anything you click on here just make sure the stroke, if it's the stroke you want to play with or the fill you want to play with, you can click on the actual brush in here and watch it change and see if you like it. And Command Z is your friend, so you can always undo any step that you didn't like. Command Z to do, you can Command Z as many times as you want if you want to go back several steps to go back to where you were before you use those brushes. So there's my first star. So I'm going to just, for this print, I'm going to just copy and paste Command C, Command V. And then I did another star in the corner where I rotated it. So it's a different rotation than the star in the middle was. So remember that you can always scale things, you know, the same object. I call these little things motifs. These are little motifs that exist inside your cluster of motifs here. So basically I can take the same motif and just copy and paste it, scale it a little smaller, maybe change the color of it if I want to in the fill or stroke box. So I did that same thing where I copied and pasted again, the same star. I rotated it here using the black arrow, and then I scaled it a little smaller. Actually, I rotated it this way. And I kept my red fill stars consistent, but I could easily click on any one of these stars. And whatever you want to change the color of, just make sure the corner of that box is overlapping. So if I want to change the fill color, I make sure the fill box is overlapping the stroke box before I pick a new color. If I want to change the stroke color, I do the opposite. I click on the stroke box to make sure the corner is overlapping the fill box before I change color. So if anytime you want to change the color inside of another shape, you just double click on it, make sure the box that you want to change the color of is on top. And you know, I can easily change that inside of that star to blue now. And you will see it be reflected in your fill and your stroke box. So I'm going to keep them all red just to be consistent with what I did up here. And then the next thing, if I remember correctly, I took the paintbrush tool, which is right here, to kind of create these brush strokes. And maybe that's where I went back to artistic calligraphy library. But again, you can go into libraries here and pick from another window and see what those brushes do. This is where I chose to not have a fill color because I just wanted brush stroke lines that almost look like little starbursts coming out of the star. So if you don't want a fill color in certain lines, if you just want it to be about stroke lines, you're going to just make sure you fill your fill box with a no fill color, or the opposite. If you want a filled shape of color with a no stroke outline, just do the opposite. So whatever you don't want to be filled with color, just make sure you click on the no fill box. So I just wanted brush strokes here, so I kind of just randomly did some brush strokes, and what I realized is that at the time I had the same distress brush on there, and for this detail I didn't want to have a distress brush, so this is where I went into a new library and I changed, clicked on the actual stroke I just did with the paintbrush, and I clicked on a different brush to kind of see what that looked like until I found one that I liked. And this is not going to be the same exact print of what I did for you today up here because I'm probably have a hard time mimicking it perfectly, but I'm going to get as close as I can here. So there I drew another thing with the paintbrush, and this is actually really thick, so I might change the actual brush itself, or I can also, remember, you can also change the weight of the stroke line. If you want to make it chunkier or thicker in any way, you can always go over here and play with the numbers over here and see what that looks like. And I drew another one here. And I just kept on taking, you can take the pencil tool or the paintbrush tool if you want to draw this. And then again, any line you draw with either the pencil, paintbrush, or pen tool, you can always change it to a different brush line later. Doesn't matter what tool you use to actually draw it. But remember, anytime you select it with the black arrow, you can always open up a brush library and change it to anything you want it to be by clicking on these brushes. So just think of these things, the pen tool, the paintbrush tool, and the pencil tool as drawing tools. But any stroke line, these are still stroke lines. They still have a blue stroke line in the middle, and they're still made up of points. They can always be converted to another brush later. And also, they can also be moved. So you can take the point, you can move it around. Every point, if it's a curved line, it has a handle, so you can always play with the handles. and manipulate even further after you drew something. Same thing with these star shapes. I mean, I could pull any one of these points and create a different look. You know, I can stretch out one side of the star if I want to by pulling with the white arrow and selecting a specific point. So remember that white arrow, when you want to dissect a part of your drawing, you're going to use the white arrow, and that allows you to select individual points and pull at them. And it also allows you to select individual points and also play with the curve handles inside of a stroke line. Black arrow is great to use when you want to select whole shapes, or if you want to scale something or rotate something. So here I am just continuing to draw, trying to replicate what I did for this print above, and just went in here. And it's really going to be a lot of your own exploring through the brush library, through these different tools, drawing different shapes, seeing how you like them, moving things around, until you find a little cluster of images that you actually think look visually compelling for now. To draw these little hand-done stars, I actually used the pencil tool, and what I did there is I double-clicked on here. I chose a different color, like a gray. And I wanted these at the time to just be drawn as a stroke outline. And I just did like the way you would hand do a star. That's how I started off. So you can see there's no fill color in there. That white that you see through the star is actually just the artboard showing through. So this is actually how I started off to draw a star that looked like this. But the only thing I did differently is I changed, this is the little toggle button. I mentioned this in one class before, that between the fill and the stroke, you can also just click back and forth with this, I call it the little double-sided toggle arrow. And what it did is just take that fill color, it took the stroke color that was once in the stroke box and moved it to the fill color, and then you can click on it again. And you can see just by looking at my star, you get two different looks when I toggle back and forth between the no fill and the solid color, between the fill and the stroke box. So when I toggle back and forth, when I toggled the solid color that I had in my stroke box over to the fill, it gave me more of a filled star with color, as opposed to when I clicked on it and I only had an outline, stroke outline. So again, you can also play with that. You know, maybe you have one color in your fill box, one no fill in another box, and you click on your shape that you just drew and you toggle back and forth and see how the shape changes based on what you just, based on just using one color instead of two colors. Then I just copied and pasted and added another little star somewhere randomly. And I did one more, copy and paste, Command C, Command V, and then I took the black arrow and moved it over here. And I stopped there at the time just to see what that little cluster of images would look like when I pick it in the Object Pattern Make window. But before you do anything with the Object Pattern Make window on any novelty print that you make, is you need to create a ground color box, and that's what this square is that I was explaining earlier. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to click and drag a square around my art. And if I draw the square and it covers up my art, just remember you can always go Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And then I'm going to double click on that ground color box because obviously it's way too dark to actually get to see the print that I made inside. So I chose to make it a lighter ground color box so I can see all the entities of my motifs inside. And for me, I personally know that I wanted a repeat that was like a cluster of the star repeating pretty close next to each other. So I want to squeeze in this box a little bit smaller by using the black arrow. Just take the scaling boxes and bring it in a little tighter. Think of this ground color box before you take it into Object Pattern Make to understand how big you might want this ground color box to be around your motifs. Think about it this way. Basically what Object Pattern Make is going to do is just going to copy and paste that same box and put it next to it. So if you think of it like that, then you understand, well, how close do I want my star print to be next to the next box that's going to be filled with the same exact star print? Do I want it to be really close? or do I want it to be further away? And if you want it to be further away, then you can maybe stretch out your box a little further. And watch what happens. I stretch out my box a little further, I copy and paste it, and I bring it over here. You can see when I sandwich these two together, which is object pattern make is going to do for me, the space in between is a lot greater. So that's how I personally knew that I wanted a ground color box that was going to be a little bit tighter, closer to my cluster of images on the top, the bottom, left and right side, because I knew I wanted my repeat to be a little tighter. So that's just a way to think about how you may or may not want your ground color box, how big you want it to be. So basically, before you take it in the object pattern make window, I just wanted to show you manually what the object pattern make window is going to do. It's going to copy this box, repeat it to the right side, repeat it to the bottom side, repeat it up top. It's going to repeat it everywhere for you. So the only way to really know what this is going to look like in repeat, first you just make your cluster images, give yourself a ground color box, and then you take the black arrow, you hover over the whole entire print until all of them are selected. And you go to object pattern make, same as we did for the plaids and the stripes. Hit OK as soon as you get into this window, Command minus to zoom out a little bit so you can actually see how your pattern is repeating. And then what I would encourage you to do is, we haven't used this pattern option box that often yet in our first 2 lessons of the stripe and plaid. This is where I'm going to show you more options inside this box. So the first thing is actually the pattern tile tool. So I'm going to zoom in, just Command plus for a second, because I just want to, same as we were looking for in the plaid, I wanted to see if there's any white lines existing in my pattern repeat. And I can already see right now that there is some. There's like a little faint white line right there. So if I wanted to get rid of that, I can just click on the pattern tile tool, and it's always going to select a box around my motif, which is my original origin of my design. And you can actually pull down here on what looks like scaling boxes, but they're actually just manipulates the pattern a little bit, scales it a little closer, and gets rid of any white lines that divide your pattern up. And you can also pull it from the side here. And also just think of this pattern tile tool. If I pull at the sides, you watch how the pattern gets closer and closer. Now, the one thing I will encourage you to know is that depending on the size of your ground color box, if you did a tight ground color box like I did, which was really tight, close next to my, my motifs, then I don't have a lot of ground space to work with. So if I started to pull this in too much, you'll start to see certain things disappear because they're starting to overlap. If I pull it away too much, then I see a white artboard line show up. You don't want that because that's actually not part of the design. That's just a white artboard showing gaps. So if you have a big ground color box around, you'll have a lot more space to kind of play with stretching out this box before those white gaps appear. So that's the pattern tile tool. Underneath, there's also called the tile type tool. So if you click on this right now, I'm under grid, which means that every box, remember these are all the ground color boxes repeated, left, right, up, down, up, down. It's the same motif over and over again. That's the grid repeat tile type. These are your repeats. And then underneath is a brick by row. So if you can just look at the diagram, what it does is takes your square boxes and kind of stacks them like a brick pattern would be. And you can see that that changes the way your pattern repeats as well. Get some of this out of there. And then there's another one under here, brick by column. And again, if you just look at the icon next to it, you can kind of see what it's doing with your repeat. It's kind of stacking it in a different way. Then there's hex by column, which is also very different because it puts the pattern repeat into a hexagon shape, which you may or may not like. So there's that. You can stretch that out until you see what that looks like. Hex by row. That one's a little funky for this pattern because it gives me a lot of white gaps. So you definitely, if you get that, you might not want to use that one because the white gaps is not accurate to what a fabric would look like. And you can always take the pattern tile tool if you see white gaps appear and you can just pull at them. Pull that pattern repeat a little closer. So I think for this repeat, I like the brick by column. I want to show you also that there's something called brick offset, which are just fractions, and it just repeats your boxes in a fraction. Just moves it over slightly. You can just watch what it does as it moves. It just fudges things down a little bit. Just play with these things. Play with pattern tile tool, tile type with these different repeats in here. Play with brick offset with these different fractions and watch what it does in your print. And those are most of the ones that I use for this lesson. So I'm just going to focus on those. Explore them all, just see what it does, and make sure you're zoomed out Command minus enough so you can actually see your whole pattern repeat across the page at least more than 4 times. Just so you can really see what's happening, because this is what your overall fabric is going to look like. And once you're happy with that design, you hit the word done. If you're not happy with it, you can hit cancel and go back to the original origin. You can go back and say, oh, maybe I want to add a little motif right in here, something right in here, and then you can take it back into Object Pattern Make and watch it repeat again. So if you feel like you're repeating your fabric now and through the Object Pattern Make window, and you feel like you want to add more elements, more motifs, you can always use this as a time to hit cancel and go back and add more elements into your ground color box before you take it back into Object Pattern Make again. But I like the way this is repeating, so I'm going to hit the word done. And here I am back at my origin of my pattern. Pull that off to the side. And, just like I told you to do on the stripe and plaid lesson, to be consistent, I want to copy and paste my fabric swatch from another pattern board that I worked on. And then go under Window Swatches. After you create a pattern through the Object Pattern Make window, you always want to make sure your Window Swatches is open, because that's where once you hit that word done in the Object Pattern Make window, the pattern actually ends up in the window swatch library. And you'll always see it's always the most recent one you just did. So if I click on my fabric swatch that I copied, just to make sure my fabric swatch square is consistent size and shape that I have on my other boards, I'm going to click on the actual pattern swatch that I just did in Object Pattern Make window. There's a little white line in there that I would have to fix, but in order to do that, I just have to go back and use that pattern tile tool again. But for right now, that's that. That's one colorway. And then I would just copy and paste and recolor the second colorway. So make sure once you have your second colorway, all you have to do is recolor. Click on it with the black arrow. Click on the recolor artwork box. It's the same tutorial as I showed you in the stripe and plaid lesson. Double click on any color in here. Make sure your recolor artwork box is checked. And just start double clicking on any color and changing it to another color, see what it looks like. And as long as you have that recolor artwork box checked, you will see it change for you in live time, which I definitely encourage you to do, so that way you can see what you're working with for your colorway number 2. I want to show you something also that we may or may not have discussed. So if you ever run into an issue where you've used a solid opaque white that matched the artboard color, or if you use the darkest black color in your original origin design, I'm going to make that happen for me. I'm going to use the darkest black color here in this red little star, just so I can show you that there might be a problem that might show up later on when you try and recolor. I'm going to hit OK for right now. I'm going to click back on this. Yep, okay, this is what I wanted to show you. If you use the darkest black or the whitest white in the color picker window, what will happen if you try and recolor it later is you may notice that you have 4 colors in this print, but you'll notice that there's not 4 color chips that exist in the recolor artwork box. There's only 3, because I used the darkest black in this little star right here. This color chip is missing, and this only seems to happen in the recolor artwork box when you use the darkest black and the whitest white. No other colors will give you this issue. But when you see that chip missing, and we know that we need to recolor with the chips only that are under, the small chips that are underneath the word new. If you see a color chip missing because you use true black or true white, just double click on that color. It will, double click on that missing space, and it will ask you, do you want to add the new color to the current harmony? You say yes, and look, a chip magically appears for you, but it doesn't show up if you don't ask Illustrator to add it to the current harmony. So now you can double click on that color, and now I can change it to red. Now, one thing I will tell you is that for some reason, I can't tell you why, that you have to do it twice sometimes for black and white chips. After you add it to the current harmony, it may or may not register right away the first time. So if you notice that it never changed from black to red, like I asked it to the first time, you have to double click on it again and go back to that color in the color picker window. Usually it takes 2 times to actually make a black color or a solid white color change into another color after you've added it to the current harmony. So once you've like what this second colorway looks like, then you can hit OK, but feel free to keep exploring different colorways until you like what you see here. Then you hit the word OK, and that means it'll stick, it'll stay there for you. If you hit the word cancel, it'll go revert back into this colorway right here. So now I have my 2 colorways of my novelty prints, just like you see here. And I'm going to go into window align. I happen to already have it open, window align. I'm going to make sure that my fabric swatches are aligned flush to the top edge of each other. And then just like I pulled out color chips here, well, I'll actually copy the heading of one of my artboards and bring it over. And then I already named this, but if it was named something else like plaid or something, just take the text tool, backspace over it, and start typing out a new name of this collection. Obviously, I don't want to call it plaid collection if it's actually a star print. So now to extract the actual colors that you see here so I can get my color chips is I still have my origin here, so I can use that to refer to for colorway 1. If you changed colorway 1 using the recolor artwork box, then you won't be able to use your origin anymore, and that's fine. But basically any color chip, any colorway you have in here, just click on it and it'll highlight in the window swatches. It'll show you where it is, and you can click and pull it out. And it might pull out really weird where it might show you the actual repeating boxes like it shows me here. Totally fine. Just pull it off into like the gray space down below your artboard so it doesn't overlap what you have here. And all I need is I can just object ungroup that whole repeat that I pulled out of window swatches. And I only need a small section of it because, again, I'm going to object ungroup it just so I can pull out a small section to get the colors that I need to eyedrop on to create these color chips. Other than that, after that, I'm going to delete this whole thing. I don't need it other than to use it to make color chips from. So I'm just going to extract a small section of the print that I know has all the colors that I need. And now I'm going to, just like I did for the stripe and plaid, to be consistent with the midterm, I'm going to copy and paste all these chips. Sorry, I'll do it from the plaid. I'll copy and paste all the chips that I had maybe on one design, and I can transfer them over, copy and paste, Command C, Command V, and bring them over here. And don't worry if I have less color chips in this new design than I had in my plaid. I can always delete off any color chips that I don't need. I only copied and pasted them because I want all my color chip squares to be the same size, and they're all nice and aligned to each other, and I want my text to be the same font and all nice and aligned together. So I copied and pasted that just to get the nice alignment and the same size chips and font. So here, where I'll actually change the color chips, I'm going to take the white arrow, select a color chip, it'll go to my fill box automatically. Make sure you're in color chips, you only have a fill, no stroke color. Then I'm going to eyedrop on top of, not the flat swatch, because remember, that fabric swatch above does not have solid colors I can pull from. It's a flat image of a pattern swatch. I have to pull it from window swatches to be able to eyedrop on top. So I'm going to eyedrop on the first color, which is the ground color. Then I'm going to take the white arrow again, click on the next color chip, change that to the red. Then click on the next color chip with the white arrow, go to the eyedropper tool, click on one of the brushstroke outlines that I did, release, click on the next color chip with the white arrow, eyedrop on the next color, which I did in the star. And I know that this print, because I know the number of colors I worked with, was only 4 colors. So therefore, I'm going to delete that 5th color that I know I don't need. And then, you know, I'll go back with the text tool, backspace over any color name that doesn't apply. Obviously, this swatch is not a burgundy color. It's more of a gray. And then I'll backspace over the next color. This is not a teal color. It's actually a red. Backspace, and just rename your colors and give them your own custom names. If you want to get creative here, you can. But please use names that actually refer to what the actual color looks like. And I know I don't need a 5th color here because, again, I only have a 4-color print. So once I've extracted my colors from the window swatches and eyedropped on them here for colorway number 1, I don't need that extra piece that I pulled from window swatches. After I'm done getting my color chips, I just delete it. So here, if I click on my colorway number 2 with the black arrow, it'll show me in window swatches where it is. There it is. I'm going to pull it out, and it's going to pull out the same way colorway 1 did, with lots of different repeats happening. So all I have to do is object ungroup that for 1 second, and then I can just extract just a small bit of that print. Make sure that all the colors that you need for the color chips exist in that little small bit of the print you pulled out. And now I can use those colors in here to create my color chips. I'm going to take the white arrow again, select my color chip, take the eyedropper tool, click on the ground color, release. Take the white arrow again, click on my color chip, eyedrop on the next color, release. Click on my next color chip, eyedrop on the next color that exists in my print, release. Click on the next color chip, eyedrop on the next color inside that motif, release. So now I know I have 4 colors: the ground color, the star fill color, the stroke outline color, and these little red stars. They're all represented here now in these color chips. So then same thing, take the back text tool, backspace over the color, because these color names should at least be named something that looks like the actual color that you're seeing. But again, you can get creative with the words, but just make it make sense to what the color actually looks like. You can be as generic with your color names or as specific as you want. And then I delete off whatever I extracted from window swatches. I don't need it anymore. You can keep your working origin files in a separate working file for you to keep. But for the midterm, I want you to not have this stuff showing over in the gray area. I want you to delete it for your midterm assignment. But keep those things, keep the plaid, keep the stripe, keep the novelty print, keep those little origins. They come in really handy whenever you want to just manipulate them into something else later. So this is what I created. I already had created it over here, so I'm just going to delete that off just to show you what my finished pattern boards may look like for the midterm. So I only created a 4th artboard for you guys to actually see how to add an artboard, but for you, for your midterm, your pattern, you are responsible for 1 stripe in 2 colorways, 1 plaid in 2 colorways, 1 novelty print in 2 colorways. Everything must have a header with a custom title. Everything has to have colorway 1, colorway 2 above it, and everything should have color chips that associate with how many colors are in your design, with custom color names that actually look something similar to the colors that they're associated with. The number of color chips are determined by how many numbers are actually in your design, number of colors that are in your design, but please make sure that you're copying and pasting all your fabric swatches and filling them with new patterns each time so that the fabric swatch is consistent, same size square, and all your color chips are copied and pasted over to the next artboard so that they're always the same color, size, and shape. What I will tell you is if you start to get more color chips in your design, because say, if, for instance, in this plaid, I used 5 color chips. If I used 6 or more, clearly I wouldn't be able to fit them on this line. So if that's the case, I'm not going to restrict you to have the same size color chips. If you needed to add a 6th color in here, you can always hover over those color chips, take the black arrow and scale them smaller. Again, because you still want them to be the same size, maybe not the same size to a board that has less color chips, but at least the same size on the same board that has the same number of color chips. Because then I can also take the text, I can move it up tighter, and I can have room now if I needed to add a 6th color chip next to it if I had more than 5 colors in my design and I didn't have enough room down here. You can always scale them proportionally together, move the layout a little bit, and create even a 2nd row if you needed to, depending on how many colors you have. Just make sure that you leave enough room that you have the color chips and the color names underneath, even if you have to do 2 rows of colors because your design had that many colors in it. So all I want is consistency. I just want consistency in alignment, consistency in the shape of the color chips, consistency in the way you present it with your heading, and to make sure that everything is nice and aligned. That will create a professional presentation that will only make your portfolio look that much better and more impressive. So that concludes the pattern lesson of the midterm. There will be another lesson where I will show you how to create how to fill your body CADs with these actual patterns above. So you will be responsible for 3 more artboards directly underneath each pattern, and each one underneath will have a body CAD that has both colorways of stripe, 1 body CAD has both colorways of plaid, and 1 body CAD that has both colorways of novelty print. It will share the same heading and the same color chips, except it will be represented through a body CAD. So stay tuned for that next video. Thank you.